Who out there wants to go to college? Jimmy, I know that you have postgraduate education. Well, thank you, Sandy, for having me, and anyone in the future who happens to watch this. Hopefully, this could be of some assistance to you as well. Um, so, I thought I would start by just laying out what it seems to me are what you can think about as three pillars for personal fulfillment and happiness when it comes to professional vocation, professional life, because college education is closely tethered the uh, to a kind of professional vocational um, question. And so I'll just say those three pillars. It seems to me that you can find fulfillment, you can find enjoyment, happiness, kind of completion, flourishing in a career if these three things come together. First, doing a thing you enjoy. Second, doing a thing you're good at. And third, doing a thing someone will pay you to do. Now, these things don't necessarily align. So, right? I enjoy playing the guitar, but I'm not good at it, and no one's going to pay me to do it. Right? Or, you know, here's another thing. Um, Maybe I'm really good at collecting belly button lint. I just have a great belly button lint collection. But no one's going to pay me to come visit my belly button lint collection. Okay. Or um, maybe I could make a lot of money being a computer programmer, and I could just go, or I could, go work for Google writing code. But I might want to poke my eyes out and tear my beard out one hair at a time, because how could I find any enjoyment in doing that with my life? Okay, so you can see how the three pillars may or may not necessarily align with any particular vocation, with any particular job. So the key to professional happiness, I think has those three pillars: something you enjoy, something you're good at, and something that someone is going to pay you to do. Okay, so this can help you think about whether college is right for you, which is our topic. Is college right for you? Does it make sense to go to college? Well, you can sort of assess that question in light of the three pillars, I think. Um, so there's a lot of questions you can ask yourself to engage this question. And actually, I'm going to put some of these questions I'm going to take from this, I think, helpful quiz. I'll just put it in the chat that you can check it out later. It's a U.S. News and World Report quiz that asks you about various questions about assessing whether college is right for you. And I'll just just mention a couple of these to help us kind of flesh this out a little bit. So, ask yourself, do you like school? And you might say, no, what? Well, another way of asking is, do you look forward to school beginning, like say after summer break or after winter break? Would you see yourself enjoying school even if, say, your friends weren't there? Now, if you're now, I guess probably not many of us are like super excited for school at the end of summer. We all want summer to keep going on, but that's fairly normal. But you could think about this as a way of asking whether you want to spend 2 more years or 4 more years or even more um, of your life going to class, going to sit in a classroom, listening to lectures, interacting with students and teachers, writing papers, reading books. Another set of questions would be: do you enjoy classroom discussions? Do you look forward to the engagement with ideas? Do you like contributing to discussions? Say, if a teacher asks for an answer, will you raise your hand to answer the question? If you say yes to that, then you might be like interactive learning, and so you might enjoy college, but more specifically, You might be interested in like smaller colleges, liberal arts universities, where there's a smaller class size and more interaction. Now, maybe you'd say, well, if you the first set of questions, if you said, well, I do like school, but I don't necessarily really like raising my hand or debating with people in class, that's also okay. You might say, I kind of like more the like larger university. I like maybe like large lectures where I can kind of sit back, I can take the notes, I can listen to the professor, I can read the book. I don't necessarily really have to put myself out there. Now, I would encourage you that in that area to try to challenge yourself, because I think it even if it's not your favorite thing, it can help. It can, I think, be a helpful skill to develop. Um, whatever you do in life, to be able to improve verbal engagement skills. But still, if there's options for you there too. Um, what about this? Do you like reading books? I mean, if you hate reading books, then maybe college, it's hard to make it all the way through without even reading a book. It is attempted. I can tell you, as I've had students who have attempted it, but not necessarily with great success. Um, and if you do, then maybe college is for you. Do you like writing? Do you enjoy writing papers, or recording observations for a lab project, or writing research papers, or writing essays, persuasive essays, analytical essays? Does in your English classes, do you get good marks or not? College involves a lot of writing. Now, there are some majors where you don't necessarily write as much as other majors, but almost any major you'll do, you'll have to write, and so that's something to consider. Um, Another question: do you enjoy learning new things, or do you? If I asked you, do you have a favorite class that you clearly say, yes, I really love math, or I really am excited for history? Um, that's also a sign that you might enjoy learning for its own sake, right? In other words, do you look at doing school like, okay, there's probably not anyone out there who just loves all school 100% of the time, all the time, but are there some subjects you really get excited about? And and if there are, then you probably like learning for its own sake. You probably see knowledge as something good in and of itself, that's desirable in and of itself, regardless of anything else that happens. um, and and I think if you say yes to that question, college can be a great thing. And also learning new things. College is an opportunity to provide you possibilities of things you didn't realize you enjoyed before, but now you do. Um, for me, as an undergraduate, I didn't realize that I would like physics, but when I took it, I loved it. I loved it. I wasn't necessarily very good at it. I found it very challenging. Um, but looking back now, I wish I had taken more physics courses. And for me, one of the mistakes I made was I tried to find the easiest classes after I got everything I had to do done. But I wish I could go back now, because college is an opportunity to challenge yourself and to learn new things that really interest you. Other questions: do you have initiative? Are you somebody who is a go-getter? Um, who will go out and figure things out for oneself? Do you have good organizational skills? Do you keep this is my challenge for me. My organizational skills are not super great, um, but even if they aren't great, it's something to think about. Do you need to constantly be reminded by your parents to do your homework, or do you kind of sort of self-initiate and get it done yourself? Even if you say, well, I'm not so great on those things, that's okay, but it is something to think about, because if you have those skills, you're going to be primed to do well in college. If you don't have those skills, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't go or you can't do well, but it is going to be a challenge, because in college, you will have so many new opportunities for extracurricular activities, to join clubs, to maybe join a sorority, fraternity, to go out on the social scene, down to where do the kids hang out these days? Like Warehouse Row. I don't think so. That's not even go there. That's like super old people. Anyway, so in other words, you'll have lots of opportunities to do new and fun things, and that's great. But um, you'll also therefore have to find a way to budget your time to think about how to balance your uh, your social life with school, and also what kind of financial situation are you in? Um, do you have scholarships? Are you playing a sport for a scholarship? Are you taking out student loans? Are you working? I find more and more of my students are working full time, sometimes even part time, or sometimes even full time jobs, and that's a lot. Now, I myself, as I was an undergraduate, I worked 3 part time jobs, um, and so it is possible. Not easy, not necessarily super fun, and probably my social life suffered for that. Even though I was in high demand, as you can imagine, I was invited to all the cool parties. No, I'm just kidding. I guess I was probably more of a nerd than anything else, but it is something to think about of, how can one balance these things, um, and if you're good at that, or even if nobody's great, no one's super great at it, or very few are probably, but it is something that plan on improving on if you'll need to. Um, so these are just some of the questions, and I encourage you to go take that U.S. News quiz, because it can be a helpful kind of way of gauging where do I see myself, my college personality. So back to our 3 pillars. What do you enjoy? These questions are trying to get at: would you enjoy being in the classroom in college? Is it something that you would enjoy? Now, that's still a process point. Okay, there's still another question. What substantively do you enjoy? Like, would you see yourself doing after college, or after high school, or after 2-year community college, or trade school, something like this? Now, it's okay if you don't necessarily know that right now. And I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in high school necessarily. And some people do, but you don't necessarily know. And sometimes people will suggest, and there is some data to support, that taking a so-called gap year can be an opportunity for you to think more about what you like, and you might go out and work, or maybe you travel, or maybe you'll do sort of service volunteer work, overseas or here. I've had lots of students who've done that. I've had lots of friends who've done the kind of gap year, not only after high school, but also after college, and that can be a really helpful time. And people can be very successful after that, and that can help you kind of think about going into college having a clear set of ideas. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor. I love working with kids. I want to be a high school teacher. I love working with mentally ill persons. I want to go into counseling. I love watching David Attenborough documentaries. I want to become a marine biologist. That's great, because college is expensive, and if you change your major 10 times, then you'll pay a lot more money. I'll give you an example. One of my best friends in high school, he went to college and he changed his major, I think 5 or 6 times. It took him 7 years to graduate, and by the time he graduated, he had two degrees, and he was only like 6 hours away from having like 4 more degrees, because he had taken so many classes. And part of that was enabled by the fact that he was on scholarship for football, so he had a little more freedom, but I think he abused that freedom a bit, and it cost him, because eventually the football scholarship runs out. On the other hand, if you don't, I don't know if I'll be a marine biologist again, you'll have opportunity to discover new things while you're in college, things that you love. And for example, I studied Spanish, and I thought, maybe I'll do this as a minor. And then I got into it, I was like, oh, I really like this, and I made it a second major. And so I political science and Spanish were my 2 majors. Um, so, think about what it is that you see yourself doing, and it's okay if you don't necessarily have a fully formed idea of this, but it can be helpful, because then you could think about, how could college help me advance that? Maybe you enjoy American history, so maybe you say, I'm gonna major in history, and I would suggest that kind of a major, or any other major really, but let's just take this one. I think you should want to value learning about American history for its own sake. There's just something better about knowing than not knowing. To know the truth about American history than being ignorant of it, and that therefore you'd be a better off as a person for knowing it. And so there's a value there. Um, we also want to think about practical questions. Well, what could I do after college if I studied history? Okay, well, there's lots of careers. Maybe you go on to work in law, you do paralegal work or legal assistant work, or go on to law school, or maybe you work at a library, or maybe you work at a museum, or do you writing and editing. There's lots of different things, but do your research. Think about it. If I say I like this thing, okay, use the Google machine. What is it? What are common professions, careers that can come out of these certain majors? And you don't necessarily have to follow those the most common paths. I mean, again, you might be a biology major. I've had students who have been like this. I'm the pre-law advisor at UTC. You might be a biology major, environmental sciences major, and be like, I want to go to law school. Great, and you can do that, and you can go to a wide different range of graduate programs, even if your undergraduate degree didn't necessarily have anything to. I mean, all knowledge interconnected, I think, but not directly related to it necessarily. Great. Um, or what about this? Wait, maybe you like building, maybe you like tinkering, maybe you like fixing. Um, if you like working with your hands, indeed, there can be very good money in such work. Welding, contracting, electrician, plumber. Such professions can be pursued through trade schools, and trade schools will often be shorter programs, and they'll often be cheaper than a four-year degree. So, for example, the average trade school cost would be around $30,000, whereas the average four-year degree is over $100,000, and that's a pretty big difference. And if you already know, saying, I don't really know if I like, sitting and reading Shakespeare, but I like building stuff. Okay. That's an important consideration. So college has to be in part a cost benefit analysis. You have to ask, is it worth the investment of the money? There's an economic component to it. It's a transaction. You are paying money, whether your own hard-earned money, or maybe some of your parents' hard-earned money, or money that a bank lends to you that you'll have to repay later, at least under the current law. Some politicians want to give free tuition for everybody making under $125,000 a year. Okay, that's possible in the future, but even still, even then, if that were the case, it would be an opportunity cost, which is to say, time you would spend doing something instead of doing something else. So it's still, even there, is a cost benefit analysis, even if such a law were to be passed. So, take that into account. Now you can think of it as an investment. An investment is where you put your money into something, looking for a greater return later. I lose some amount of money now, but I get more later. Okay, so we know from the data that on average, someone with a four-year college degree will make $25,000 more per year than on average someone with only a high school degree will. Okay, that's an important consideration. That's worth thinking about. On the other hand, that's not necessarily the case. You don't have to go to college to live a very comfortable middle-class lifestyle, or even upper middle-class lifestyle. I'll give you an example. My brother-in-law, very smart, very intelligent, but didn't like the classroom. He doesn't like sitting and reading books, just doesn't like studying. A very intelligent person. He wanted to be an electrician. And so he went straight onto the job out of high school and learned on the job, apprenticed. basically. And since then, he has moved up the chain in that corporation, or he's a foreman now. He makes more than double the salary I make. And I'm a college professor who's gone to college for 11 years. Okay. So that's also 11 more years where he was earning like money versus 11 years of basically poverty. Okay. So that's not to say, again, I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just want to tell you that there are ways of making good money and not necessarily going to college. And I think that's just a fact. And he was, in fact, he was intelligent enough where he had an opportunity, and he was a great athlete. He had an opportunity to go to Duke and play soccer. So I'm not mincing words. He's very intelligent, but he's very happy with where he is, and decided not to do that. For what it's worth. Still, money also should not be money. Money is an important consideration, but it's not the only consideration. I think that it's a mistake to only look at college in terms of how much money will I make. Now, of course, I understand that's a question parents want to talk about. It's a question you should want to ask, and I have been talking about that because it's an important factor, but it's not the only factor. It's not the only factor. I go back to I'm trained as I'm a political scientist, but I'm more specifically a political philosopher. I'm trained in philosophy, and one of my favorite philosophers is Socrates. And Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." What do you think he meant by that? The unexamined life is not worth living. It's time for some interaction. Allie, what do you think? What do you think Socrates means by the idea the unexamined life is not worth living?
Not knowing what you like do is not worth it. I don't know.
Okay, so you need to you need to examine yourself to know thyself. Noce te ipsum, as they would say in the Latin, to know the truth about yourself, to know what it is to be human, to know what it is to be a human person. And a liberal education, a liberal arts education, which is to say, an education where you have a wide experience, literature, history, science, mathematics, right? Indeed, philosophy, theology. These things engage the whole person. They engage what it means to be human across the wide variety of human experience. And so a classically inspired education of the sort that Socrates thought was essential is constitutive of. I mean, it is, how can I put it differently? It facilitates your becoming fully human, of knowing who you really are because you know what it is to be human. And therefore, and this is to me the strongest argument for a kind of college education, the value is growing into a fully formed human being, of living an examined life, of living a life more worthy of living. Um, and some college experiences are better to acquire that than others, I think, and that in those considerations you have to think about in light of some a range of considerations. I'd be happy to talk about outside of this context if you'd like, but just as a general point, I think that there's a range of college experiences that can help bring that about. Let me I guess I was going pretty fast, so I guess I probably should have paused at each question to see if you have questions. But let me just pause there and see if you have questions so far about anything I've said. Okay. um, right. So um,
I'll ask a question.
yeah.
So I was somebody who took a lot of years before I went to college, because of a number of things. How do you see the benefit of someone like me, or the challenge there, someone like me who went into the workforce and the military before going into college?
Yeah, no, good question. Um, so there can be a benefit to that. There can be a challenge to that. So one challenge to that can be transitioning back into um, the habit of study, the habit of the habits that are proper to classroom, taking notes, taking exams, studying, reading books. If one wasn't necessarily doing those kinds of things um, in the military, or working in the private sector somewhere or something, that can be a transition period. It can be a challenge. On the other hand, it can be a benefit because you can bring those life experiences of real world life experiences to the classroom to bear on your study and to bring a perspective to learning into the classroom that can be very fruitful. And so I love it when I have students who are coming later in life. Now, some of the data does suggest that at least as a general matter, on average, that people away from college for a long time don't necessarily do as well as if you come right out of high school or maybe only a year or so. Um, that's just a matter of averages, and there may be various reasons for that. But I think, at least in my experience, anecdotally, my students who have come out of I have a number of students who have come out of military service. They're some of my best students, and I think it's all about how serious, and especially at that point, you have a level of maturity where especially if you come from the military, you have a level of discipline that you can transfer over to study. That doesn't make it as difficult, and there's a goal orientation that if you've been out in the professional world, you want to go back to school, you have a good, clear reason why you're going, usually, and you have a specific goal you want to achieve, and you're driven to do it. Whereas sometimes people coming out of high school to say, and this is probably the case in my case, well, you're supposed to go to college. What do you do now? Oh, mom and dad said you have to go to college. That's the next thing. That's certainly the way my wife's family was. It's unacceptable that you need to have your top 10 list of schools and you have to have your applications out. There's just no question that you're kicked out of the house if you don't apply to college. And okay, like I understand that, especially if you have parents who are college educated and encouraging that, and that for your parents to push that can be a good thing. But I would also suggest that it is worth taking a little step back and saying, okay, let's at least look at if college makes sense for what this person wants to do, what my child wants to do, and et cetera. And that's speaking of someone who's a college professor who it's in my interest to push you all to go to school. Yay, more students, more salary. But I think that, to be fair, we do have to think about how it's not necessarily the best fit for every single person. Um, does that help, or do you have follow up?
Yeah, that's great. And I do have a follow-up, and the follow-up would be, what do you see as the advantages or disadvantages of online school versus on-campus schooling?
Okay, good. And of course, that is a very timely question as the giant truck drives by. Sorry, I hope that's not too loud. Um, uh, because in the COVID pandemic, there's a lot of online education going on, and a lot of professors who never taught online before are teaching online. I myself had already taught online before this, so I've taught online and I've taught in person. I myself prefer in person because I think that, again, going back to Socrates, I think there's an ideal of classic education where you have a face-to-face interaction where I mean, the social psychologists, the behavioral psychologists tell us that when you interact with somebody, the facial expression someone makes actually carries more weight in communication than what is actually said. I'll give you an example. Say I'm holding my baby, Zaylee. I say, "Oh, you're such a naughty, bad baby." Now, or imagine this. If I say, "You are such a good baby. I love you." Right? What's the message that she's going to get in those two examples? The facial expression, and I threw in tone too, but facial expression, because tone can be delivered over online, and so can facial expression if you're doing Zoom. But classes that don't have Zoom, say, where so-called asynchronous classes where you just log in, do your work, and the professor like types messages, but don't necessarily have face-to-face interaction through Zoom, which is quasi face-to-face. I mean, you're not literally face-to-face, you're kind of face-to-face, but fine. All I mean to say is that there's something lost, it seems to me, that you can't necessarily gain entirely back. Now, there's other ways to get it back. You can have discussion boards, you can have other things, and so I'm not poo-pooing that. And I teach online classes, and in fact, during the pandemic, I'm teaching my classes online. And so I think that there's ways of doing it that can try to approximate it. But I would say that it's worth trying to get those in-class experiences, and it's worth trying to get those interactions, and those can be some of the most fulfilling and enriching moments of your education. And there's some college universities that really strive for that. For example, St. John's is a college that is really built on the idea of the small seminar, and you have the professor is not even a professor. The professor is called a tutor, and you set forth a text for the students to read. And you might be reading like, I don't know, you might be reading one of Plato's dialogues, and the students, like the tutor would just say a question: "What does Socrates mean by virtue?" And the tutor just sit back, and they'll force you to sit there and discuss it. And that would be nice. I'd like that job, and that's pretty. But you facilitate a discussion. So if you like that kind of learning, that kind of interaction, that's something to look at. But moreover, that kind of interaction is approximated, I think, even outside of St. John's, and many programs, when you get to your upper level classes, they're supposed to be smaller, 20 or less, and you're trying to get to that level of interaction. At least to UTC, that's what we strive for, and many other universities, I think, have that kind of a model. That when you get deeper into a subject, you have smaller class size, you have that interaction. And I think that's a great thing. I think it can be a great thing. And but at the same time, if you have an opportunity to sort of knock out some gen ed credits through Chat State, and maybe it's, maybe it is, English writing 101 or something like that. Like, okay, maybe you can turn in your essays online and kind of get it. Like, I think it can totally make a lot of sense. Are any of you taking Chat State stuff right now? Yeah, what are you taking?
I'm going through collegiate high, so my last 2 years of high school are completely done by college classes. This semester I'm taking criminal justice, intro to criminal justice, fundamentals of communication, macroeconomics, yoga, pre-calculus algebra, and early British literature.
Wow. Are you taking any of those online?
They're all virtual, so none of them are online, they're just virtual, but it still is definitely not my preferred way of learning. I definitely prefer being in person.
Yeah. But how are you doing?
My grades haven't suffered. It's just I have to put forth a little bit more effort to maintain those grades.
Yeah. That's a full schedule too. Wow, that's impressive. Well, now let me ask you, did anything I said spur questions for you about in terms of thinking about longer term goals? Are you still interested in political science, or I can't remember if you were or not?
Yeah, I'm still interested in political science. I've added on criminal justice. I'm actually talking to like a bunch of people, and then looking closer at like what I really want to do. I've kind of outlined a path of going to MTSU and dual majoring in criminal justice and political science, and then going on to a law school.
Awesome. No, that's great. And that, and again, back to the pillars point, like to know, like, would the practice of law be something you would enjoy? You know, I would encourage you to, and maybe you have already done this, or maybe you watch, like, whatever special victims unit or some of these shows. I mean, some of these shows can give you a window into what it's like to be a lawyer, but and I'd be happy to connect you with, if you're interested in wanting to shadow or hang out with a lawyer, or doing some, like, maybe some sort of clerk type, runner type work for a lawyer, but to get, a good thing to try to do, either now or later, would be to get into a law office and try to see the day-to-day work of a lawyer, and get a sense of if that would be something that you would enjoy. Um, and there's obviously many different areas of law, and they can be very different from each other, the kind of work, but generally, there would be a commonality between all lawyers and the kind of stuff that, there's a lot of research into the law. There's a lot of writing briefs, or writing response briefs, or doing, the work of discovery in a civil lawsuit and stuff like this. So that, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about that if you want to. But then back to the pillars point, something you enjoy and something you're good at, and that's something, at least in the context of law. Are you good at writing? Do you find yourself, when you get into arguments with your siblings or your mom, God forbid, marshaling all the evidence and making this compelling case to, persuade her that, that you really do deserve that new car or whatever? In other words, do you find your argumentative skills to be something you are good at, and or that you would like indulging? And of course, law is an area where you can find some remuneration. You can find some pay. Of course, there's a scale there, with law school, with a legal career. I mean, for example, if you might have a strong sense of care for social justice, for the vulnerable, the poor, and or in our criminal justice system, potentially wrongfully accused. Maybe you want to become a public defender, and that can be a very noble vocation, to defend the criminally accused who are indigent, too poor to be able to afford a lawyer. On the other hand, that kind of practice doesn't necessarily pay a lot of money. It's not going to be the most lucrative career. Okay, so you got to balance that. You got to think about that. And sometimes people do it for a little while, then go do something else. Anyway, so that's to those pillars. Something you're good at, something somebody will pay you to do. And with in our world, what kind of salary do you need to live a decent lifestyle? And you can think about here also, marriage and having children. How does a career play into those kinds of life goals, and raising a family, and all that stuff's important. And those are important questions to think about. When even now you might think, man, getting married, that seems a long way. I mean, yes, but at the same time, if that's something that you feel like you're called to, the vocation of marriage, especially if you are Catholic, or if you're a Christian persuasion, that is something that is given by God, and that all of this that we've been talking about, in terms of professional education is in some sense ordered to, because your vocation in marriage is to be a person who gives oneself to one's spouse for their good, and for ultimately their salvation and the salvation of any children that you may have. And so all of this that we've been talking about, if you have a calling to marriage from within the Christian tradition, at least, and I would say other religious traditions as well. I think Judaism and Islam, there'd be some similar points to be made here, that these things have to also be considered when you're thinking about college, and college can be a great place to meet a spouse. You know, that's another thing. So you know, any other questions?
I have one for you, Kody.
Okay.
Allie is 14, and when I asked her to log in tonight, she's like, but I'm only a freshman. I don't have to think about this for a long time. What would be, or is there a benefit to thinking about it now and planning it out? Or should they wait until their senior year and figure it out?
Yeah. Well, Allie, I sympathize with you because that's kind of how I thought about it when I was a freshman. But to be honest, I wish I had started thinking about it a little sooner, just for myself, because you don't necessarily. I mean, at least these questions about how much, like, what do you see yourself wanting to do? Where do you see your vocation professionally, if you have one, and what it would look like, and even if you're just freshman, like, well, how do you think about that? Well, what classes do you like? What subjects do you like the most? And just reflect on that. That is already preparing for college, because or even thinking about college, because as I say, that's part of the skill set that or part of the drive you'll need to have to be successful, is actually being interested in learning. And so just reflect on that's part of this. And also, you know, there's some really good guides out there, and it's never too soon to start trying to think of where you might see yourself. Are you really itching to, you know, I know it can be sometimes suffocating in that price for home. You know, I want to get out of here. I want to go out of state, or no, I want to stay home next to my family. Those are questions to start thinking about too. I'm just kidding. I know it's not suffocating there. I've been in there. It's a very nice home. There's a lot of air. You can breathe well. Anyway, where would you think you want to go to college? So starting to look at places. There's some really good guides out there to colleges, and I meant to look this up before. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. Put the link in here. So the Intercollegiate Studies Institute puts out a guide called Choosing the Right College. And I think it's a pretty helpful thing to look at. I think it hasn't been updated though for a few years, but and I'm not finding it right away. So it's a little old, but like maybe 5 years old. But and I'll look for the link and I can send it to you later. But you know, you with your parents, or maybe just your parents right now, if you're really not interested, it's something worth looking, kind of thumbing through and saying, okay, which universities are really good for X, which are really good for Y, and what kind of culture is at the university? In other words, is it a place where you know, where there is a kind of community that I would be attracted to, you know, for the kinds of things I'm interested in. What's the political sort of leanings of the campus? What's the religious life on the campus look like? What kinds of extracurricular activities are there? How are they ranked with regard to these programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Those kinds of things are worth thinking about. And again, the climate can change within 4 years, but just to kind of start thinking about what's a place where you would see yourself. And you know, and I wish that I had taken more opportunity to go visit different campuses earlier in my career. I mean, I visited a couple of places when I was like a senior, and I kind of felt like since I had waited that long, it's like, oh crap, I got to make a decision now, and I don't have very much time. I visited like a couple, and then I just, you know, it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do this. But if I had maybe a couple of years earlier started thinking a little more about it and thought, you know, hey, what about this place? What about this place? And maybe I could have. And the thing is that my parents didn't necessarily, they pushed me to go to college, but they didn't necessarily give any specific advice about how to do that. Both of my parents had some college education, neither of them finished. So I guess I was the first person in my family to, you know, graduate with a college degree. And that can be a hard thing to try to do it by yourself, but, you know, reach out to people in your community, parents, their friends. I'm happy to help you. people in your church community, wherever else, if you have questions about, different things about college, and take advantage of that, of seeking out wisdom. So yeah, I do think that it's okay to think 4 years from now, okay, it's a ways away, but just at least start reflecting on it a little bit. I would suggest is a good thing. Any other questions? Okay, political science at UTC, that's where you need to be. Another thing to think about, at least just given the folks that are here, I mean, it is worth considering, secular versus religious universities. I mean, those are different experiences, and I have taught at both. So that's another thing I'd be happy to talk to you about if you have more questions on the line of how different of an experience is it going to secular public schools versus specifically religious colleges, Christian colleges, Catholic colleges. I'm happy to discuss that with any of y'all if you have more questions down the line. Generally speaking, your private universities are going to be more expensive, and 25, 30, 35, $40,000 a year. It's very expensive. Whereas your public, at least in Tennessee, public state universities will be much more affordable. And I think that if you are a religious person, you can find a great education at various public institutions in Tennessee and other places. But it can be an environment that, where you seek out community of people of faith, and you have to be deliberate about, how you approach your education, and, because you will face some hostility to some of your beliefs sometimes. And that can be fine. That can be helpful to challenge you, help you grow. But on the other hand, religious universities provide an opportunity for perhaps deepening your faith and strengthening your faith in ways, the kinds of classes you could take to deepen your understanding of theology and other things. Can also provide you an opportunity to meet and make potentially more friends of that persuasion. And so, those are things to think about.
I can attest that the private school is very, very expensive.
Yeah. Which private school took your money?
Tennessee Temple University, and then Piedmont International University, Tennessee or Temple Baptist Seminary. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I went to Mid-America Nazarene University initially to play football. And for various reasons, including injury, I transferring to Kansas State University. And yeah, it's very expensive. Now I had some scholarship money that helped some, but there's a trade-off, definitely a trade-off in terms of finances. The sales point of something like Covenant College here in town. I mean, their kind of sales pitch is that you're going to have a very specific, enriching, ennobling or sanctifying community, and you're going to have an education informed by Reformed faith, and you'll have that strong community, and you'll have that experience living there, et cetera. But you have to pay for it. You have to pay a lot of money for it. On the other hand, at somewhere like UTC, like you can seek out that community and find it, and you're not necessarily going to have that ethos in all your classes. But on the other hand, you can bring that perspective to the classroom, and you can contribute that, and challenge others with that perspective. So I think that I've taught in both worlds, and I've seen students succeed in both worlds and fail in both worlds. And so there's no silver bullet in terms of, oh, if you go to this school, then you'll just be automatically successful. Regardless of where you choose to go, you have to bring to bear a range of nose of the grindstone, habits of study and self-sacrifice and self-denial that are required to be successful in any area of life. And sometimes it can be hard, but especially if you're also working a job. But those are things to think about, that it can make sense to take some time and maybe work for a while, save up some money. And again, the political scene here is relevant to think about. I mean, just to tell you specifically, the Joe Biden has proposed to erase student debt up to $10,000 and to offer free tuition for anyone under 125,000 whose household makes it less than $225,000. How much of a chance is how likely is that would pass if Biden and the Democrats win? I don't know. I think there is some chance of it, and that could alter this calculation. So keep an eye on that. It's worth also noting in Tennessee the Tennessee Promise. That seems like a really good deal to get a lot of hours under your belt from community college. So those take advantage of any opportunities out there like that, and look for scholarships. There's so much free money to get out there, and there's good resources for this. And just use your Google machine, but send out your applications for scholarships far and wide. And it's try to work hard now. Allie, if you're a freshman, work hard now to make those grades, because that can save you a lot of money later. And I would suggest it's really worth investing in SAT or ACT course preparation courses. I wish I had done that. I didn't do that. I did it for the GRE, which is the exam to enter into graduate school. But the standardized exams are heavily weighted. Now a little less so. So a lot of universities are moving a little more away from them. But in the next 5 years, I don't see them really moving away from it significantly. Just to say, if you have, a 32 or higher on the ACT, or higher than a 1300 on the SAT, I think it's still 1600 scale. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember. But in the upper echelons, say, in the top quintile or even higher, that can make a big difference for the kinds of scholarship money that you can get. And how do you get better at these exams? Well, you have to kind of practice taking them over and over. That's part of it. It does measure some stuff you already know, but part of it's just learning how to take tests well. And part of that is just learning how to attack a test, big multiple choice test. And that's can be very annoying and not necessarily something you want to do. But if you can convince your parents, or if you can have the money, or it is, I think, a very good investment to pay the $1,000 or whatever it is. It's somewhere around there, I believe, to take a course preparing you for the ACT, for the SAT. And that can make a big difference and definitely pay for itself.
Just really quick, I have one more question for you, Kody. You might have already touched on this, but you mentioned community college and getting some experience and hours under your belt would be a great way to do that. What about dual enrollment while you're still in high school? Like Allie attends Notre Dame, she could get into some dual enrollment, or I don't know if Katie mentioned it, but she's dual enrolling at Collegiate High at Chat State. So she's graduating with an associate's degree. So they're two completely different programs, but are those programs that you would recommend for any kids that feel like they want to do it to get that experience and extra hours?
Yeah, I think that those are great programs that can really be cost-saving measures, and they can they can push one to challenge one a little earlier to develop the skills necessary to be successful in college. Now, for some people, it can be too much. They might not be ready yet. There's also the consideration of someone who wants the traditional full 4-year college experience, and some people still put value on that. And so, if you want to have that, and you don't want, and you just, part of that's like there's like the desire for the full social component of it, and So, keep that in mind. If that's something you really want, then maybe you shouldn't necessarily spend a ton of time because that'll cut off time, or, even there though, you could have easier semesters. You could have shorter, you would have, more semesters with less course loads. So I think it's a good thing. And yeah, I would just, the other point I didn't make before, which I just thought of, is the value of a college degree. There is a critique out there, and someone named Brian Kaplan, who is an economist at George Mason University, and he has argued that the bachelor's degree is the market of potential employees in our economy is oversaturated with bachelor degrees. And so he actually argues that college education has become less valuable than the average amount of money you're paying for it, for over $100,000. The reason why he says that is he says for a lot of employers, college degrees are basically signaling devices, which is to say, look, I show up on time. I follow directions. I turn in my assignments on time. I can learn to do thing that you teach me. I can learn skill. And what he says is that a lot of people who go into college already have those skills that employers are looking for. And they pay all this money to signal to the employers a skill set that they already had. So if you study like underwater basket weaving or something like that, there's not necessarily a super like great market for that set of skills to be paid. Yeah, you can still go get a job working for Google or something, but or Chatham or Volkswagen or whatever place you want, whatever large company that's around. But you're not signaling your basket weaving skills. What you're signaling is that you can do these basic things that the college degree is kind of like a stand-in for. So what does that mean? Well, unfortunately, what that means, one proposal is that to cut out that reality of companies considering that would be to disallow companies to inquire about your college degree or lack thereof. And then would that change things? But I don't know that that's going anywhere. So just be aware of that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go to college necessarily, but just be aware of that. That's a big part of what employers look at the value of a degree as. And unfortunately, for a lot of employers, there's not necessarily a way around that. Now, for some there are, and some employers out there intentionally go about not asking that question because they believe they're very talented people that haven't necessarily gone to college. And you can look for those opportunities. But I just mentioned that because there are majors out there, and I'm not bashing on underwater basket weaving. I'm sure it's a great skill, but just be mindful of be mindful of the kinds of things you're studying, and if you can develop additional skill sets other than just I show up on time, I can follow directions, but I am learning about how the law works, or I am learning about computer programming, or I am learning about engineering, or I'm learning about architecture. I'm learning about these things that are marketable skills and knowledge. And again, it's not reducible to that. It's not just about money, but you have to also think of it in terms of what the outcome of what the benefit of the cost it will be. So knowledge for its own sake, but also hopefully for the sake of something that will pay you. What'll make you happy? What will you be good at? And what someone will pay you for when it comes to a job. And hopefully you would see your college education contributing to that. That would be my summary message. Unless you have any other questions. Okay. Jake, chomping at the bit over there, man. I thought I saw you raise your hand at one point, but I might have hallucinated that.
Who's playing the piano?
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Someone else came in, A and C coups. No questions? Okay. I think that's all I have.
I think we're good then. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Kody. We greatly appreciate it. One last chance, kiddos, anything? No, Jake's also a freshman, so he probably feels similarly to Allie. He wants it to be probably one of the furthest things from his mind. But Katie started planning probably when she was in middle school, so I don't think it's ever too early to plan. So I think it was very helpful. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Kody, again. And everybody else, thank you also for joining us.
Yep, happy to do it. Good to see you all, and I'm sure I'll see you all again soon.
Absolutely. All right, and I'll see most of you guys back next week.
Okay, well, if any of you all ever have questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kody.
Sure.
Bye,
Take care.
guys.
Bye-bye.